The biggest twist in Evil Dead Burn is that the heroes never actually destroy the evil. They only interrupt it. And honestly, that changes the entire ending. Because if you walked away thinking the nightmare was finally over, the movie is basically telling you the exact opposite. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Breakdown Epic. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Now, this ending works because it does something very smart. It gives you a survival victory without giving you a mythological one. Alice makes it through. Several possessed family members are taken down. The house confrontation ends, but the actual force behind everything is never fully erased. And in my opinion, that is the key to understanding what this film is really doing. Evil Dead Burn is not closing the curse, it is widening it. The most important reveal in the entire movie is what the ceremonial dagger actually does. At first, it feels like the story is building toward a classic answer. Find the special weapon, stab the right body, stop the evil, survive the night. Simple. Except it is not simple at all. The dagger does not permanently kill the entity. It only separates the evil from the host it is currently controlling. That means every time Alice uses it, she is not ending the threat, she's just forcing it to move. And the second the film tells you that, the whole ending changes shape, because now survival becomes temporary by design. The family's grandfather spent years researching the Book of the Dead and collecting artifacts connected to it, which means this was never just random horror falling onto one unlucky household. This family was already tied to the curse through history, obsession, and knowledge. The force is not only attacking them, it is being drawn toward them. That matters because it turns the story into something bigger than a possession movie. It becomes a collision between an ancient evil and a bloodline that accidentally inherited the responsibility of understanding it. And honestly, in Evil Dead terms, that kind of inheritance nobody wants. Family trauma is one thing. Family trauma with demon artifacts is a whole different tax bracket. Now let's go back to Alice, because her ending is much more interesting than just final girl survives. Alice survives because she keeps pushing deeper into the truth instead of only reacting to the horror. She searches the grandfather's notes. She pieces together the function of the dagger. She understands that the legends surrounding it are incomplete and dangerous, and that gives her storyline more weight than simple survival instinct. She is not just running, she is learning. That is why the ending has emotional force. She comes out of the movie not just bloodied and traumatized, but changed. She now knows enough to understand that beating one possessed body is not the same thing as stopping the curse. And that knowledge is terrifying, because it means she gets to live with the awareness that the evil is still out there, just looking for the next opening. That is where the post-credit scene becomes so important. The first post-credit moment confirms what the film was already building toward. The threat escaped. A surviving possessed figure meets someone completely outside the original family circle, which tells us the curse has already spread beyond the main location. That scene is not just there to scare you one last time. It is there to make the ending feel larger. The evil is no longer trapped inside one household drama. It is mobile now. It can move, attach, and continue. That means Evil Dead Burn is not a closed story. It is the ignition point for whatever comes next. And then the second post-credit scene works in a totally different way. That one feels more like a universe connector, a reminder that the newer films are not operating separately from each other. They belong to the same larger nightmare. It does not push the plot the way the first stinger does, but it does something valuable for fans. It says, yes, this all still connects, and yes, the franchise knows exactly what world it is building. Now, one of the reasons I think this ending works so well is that the movie never forgets the emotional side of the horror. The supernatural chaos is intense, but underneath that, the story is about toxic family dynamics, unresolved pain, emotional manipulation, blame, and the way people stay trapped in harmful cycles long before the literal evil arrives. That is why Alice's journey matters. She is not just escaping demons. She is confronting a family history that has already been poisoning people in quieter ways. The possession and violence are the loudest part of the story, but the emotional damage was already there. In my opinion, that is what gives the movie more depth than it would have had if it was only a gore machine. The evil works because it lands in a family already full of fracture points. Loyalty, fear, guilt, denial, all of that makes everyone more vulnerable. So when the supernatural force enters, it does not create weakness from nothing. It exploits what was already there. That is very Evil Dead, and also exactly why the ending feels so nasty. The family home becomes a war zone, but emotionally it was already unstable before the first major possession. Now let's talk future, because Evil Dead Burn is very clearly setting up more. If the entity can only be separated, not destroyed, then the next story immediately has a stronger engine. The danger is not whether it survived, we already know it did. The danger is where it goes next, who it finds, and whether the people trying to stop it now understand enough to fight smarter than the last group did. That is why Evil Dead Wrath already has a solid foundation. It does not need to invent a new reason for the horror to continue. Burn already gave it one. The weapon is incomplete. The knowledge is partial.
The evil is active, and Alice, if she returns, would now enter the next film with something no one else had at the start of this one: experience. Not enough to feel safe, obviously, because nobody should ever feel safe in this franchise, but enough to make her much more interesting in a follow-up. And here is the bigger theory I keep coming back to. What if Evil Dead Rise is not just expanding the mythology of the Book of the Dead, but redefining the rules of resistance? In older versions of the story, survival often feels chaotic and improvised. Here, the research matters. The artifact history matters. The fact that the family's grandfather had already been collecting answers matters. That means future films may go even harder into the idea that the evil can be studied, tracked, and maybe one day cornered, even if it cannot yet be fully destroyed. That opens up a much bigger mythology than simple possession survival horror, and I think that is exactly why this ending is so effective. It gives you just enough information to make the world feel larger, but not enough to make anyone feel safe. So overall, Evil Dead Rise ends on a very clear message. Defeating one host is not the same thing as defeating the evil itself. The dagger helps, but it is not the final answer. Alice survives, but she does not win in the absolute sense.
The curse moves on. The post-credit scenes confirm the danger is still active, and the franchise now has a much bigger path forward than just repeating the same isolated possession setup again. And honestly, that is exactly what a good horror ending should do. Give you relief for a second, then make you realize the nightmare only changed rooms. But anyway, that is my breakdown of Evil Dead Burn and what the ending really means for the future of the franchise. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Do you think the entity was ever truly beatable? Or is the entire point of Evil Dead that it can only ever be delayed, never destroyed? I will catch you in the next one.